Good morning and welcome to our candidate profile program, To the Point. It is 7 a.m. or so on August 1, 2022, Monday. I'm Troy Torres, and with me in studio, of course, is my co-host.
Half a day.
That's Johnny Rosario, and we're so proud to have in our studios for the first time Republican senatorial candidate Vince Borja. Half a day, Vince.
Good morning, Troy. Good
It's
morning. Thanks for
it's
having
it's
me.
it's a pleasure to have you in our studios. When we come back, we're going to get started with there are two segments that we have to this program. One is called the BS round. I'll explain that when we come back. And then, of course, the second segment has to do with the issues. When we come back from this, well, it's not going to be a short commercial break.
As a defense attorney, I've represented many people who, if they weren't poor or they had received a higher education, may have taken a different path. As senator, I will propose a scholarship for those whose struggles are less academic and more financial. Let's keep our university full, not our prison. I'm Thomas Fisher. I not only approve this message, I wrote it.
Paid for by Tom for Guam, Drake Diaz, Treasurer.
Bottom line is we're going to make you a better person. You're going to be healthier and fitter than you were before.
Better hear what I've got to say, because you won't get it again.
Welcome back to our candidate program, To the Point, where we have in studio Republican senatorial candidate Vince Borja. Now, thank you so much for joining us for this program, because this is where you get to see the candidates in the flesh, and we try to present or to ask questions that help you to understand whether they're, number one, sincere and honest, and number two, knowledgeable of the issues that matter most to our viewership here at Kandit. And, you know, I was saying in this morning's news program when we were talking about how we're going to have Vince Borja in studio, that I don't understand how he didn't make it in the last election. And I have to believe it was because of this stupid pandemic that really just sort of made things all topsy-turvy. But Vince Borja is the sort of political candidate that you expect would win, and I predict that he would win, or he will prevail in this year's election. So it makes it all that more important that we hear what he has to say. And to start us off, Mr. Borja, we have what's called, you've watched this program with other candidates, right? And I think you might be our only our second Republican senatorial candidate in studio, right? We had Sandra Rages, Sayal.
Yeah. Oh, and Harvey Egna.
Oh, we had Harvey Egna. That's right.
Yeah.
We haven't had Senator Chris Duenas as a candidate yet, right?
just as an interview.
And I think we're reaching out to Tom Fisher. He's a Republican senator. Anyway, so Mr. Borja, the first segment that we have is sort of like a job interview segment where we ask you some uncomfortable political questions, and it's not really your answers that matter as much as whether our audience can gauge that you're being sincere and that you're telling the truth. So Johnny's going to ask you these questions,
Okay.
and she's got a buzzer, what we call the BS buzzer. If
So-
she thinks that you're BSing,
Yeah, I will buzz this.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
All right, go ahead.
Okay.
Ready. Name a character flaw you've struggled to improve about yourself.
I think if it's one thing that I need to improve about myself is sometimes holding back, because I think, or when I speak to others, because as much as I'm very straightforward, very in most of my professional work, I think because I'm Chamorro and I grew up on Guam, is that I understand like how we were very reserved in how we talk to people, but I struggle because of course professionally I grew up in mainland states where it's very cutthroat, straight to the point. No, and so moving back to Guam over the last almost 10 years, or being back in Guam the last 10 years, I really need to work on just being straightforward. Like last election, I went with humble leadership, and that was more of, I don't want to come out very aggressive, but more of just try to tell my story. And so I think I need to work on just being, really that's who I am, is very straightforward, and that's something I need to work on, especially moving forward.
Oh, cool. Okay. Give us your unfiltered opinion about the latest scandal in the Democratic Party of Guam, where its attorney encouraged voters to not vote for 12 of its candidates.
I think for me, right, like I'm a leadership guy. If you guys did some research on me, if it's one thing that I'm very passionate about is helping and growing people. And I think when you're in a position where you represent a party and a group of people, that you represent the interests of the good, the bad, and everybody you stand for. And so, of course, I mean, obviously, as a Republican, I'm excited because like leadership, right? It's how do you motivate and influence others to follow you, and that's how you unmotivate and you lose the engagement and you get people to unfollow you,
Amen.
right?
So
And I
as a
think that-
Republican, you're glad to see the division in the Democratic
I
Party.
hope they get their stuff together, because I think at the end of the day, if they, granted, I'm confident the Republicans are going to come out successful this election, but they need to come together, because Democrat or Republican, I think at the end of the day, they're going to need to work for the people, and it's going to take people who represent people no matter what their beliefs are.
Very cool.
Yeah. What was the biggest mistake senators made this term?
That's a tough one, because I think obviously Chris Dueñas' bill was something that I hoped would have passed, and it wasn't just because I wanted my freedom back, right? I wanted to be able to go into bars but I think there are a lot of things that required a lot of open dialogue with the legislature and the executive branch. I felt like the pandemic, although I'm not going to take away the credit that is due to the governor for a lot of the things that she did to help Guam get through the pandemic, but I felt like, because a lot of times too, sometimes they would make the decisions and they were wishy-washy. Like they would put the roadblock in, and then of course when pressure came out, they would draw back, or they would implement a policy, or public health will put out something, and then when there was pressure from the public, they would take some of that back. So I think that if there was open dialogue and she was able to have these discussions with the legislature, that there wouldn't, at least she would have been confident that all sides were heard and the decision was made, and she could have stuck to it. But I think that was one thing that the legislature as a whole should have moved forward on.
Cool. Advice for the governor to improve her administration.
I think it'll go back to my what I just said earlier in regards to just being open to opposing views. I feel, and just watching some of the news outlets and a lot of the supporters that come out in support of her decision, it's really like, it's okay for people to disagree, but really just I think there has been some attempt to have discussions with her, but I don't think she really listened, right, in regards to hearing what others had to say and coming to a middle ground. Because I think for me, it's really more about, there are different sides, and not every side is going to work. It's just like if a Republican was in office right now as the governor, they would have done things that might have worked. We never would have known, right? Because it was just really, for them, it was always a one-side decision. And definitely just listen to both sides and always come to the middle ground. And that's my belief, I guess, in leadership. Or I mean, not I guess, but really in leadership, it's how do you come to the middle ground? Because not every side is right. Not every side is right and not every side is wrong. And it's just being able to open and listen and see what others have to say and be open to change. And I think that that's important.
I have a question that's not part of the lineup. Where did you get your shirt?
This shirt I bought on the base.
Oh, on base. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Don't you have a traffic question?
Oh yeah, should slower traffic keep right?
So I first learned to drive in the States, so yes. It frustrates me because, it's like, dude, move over, right? And
All
in
right.
Texas, because I lived in Texas most of my time, is like, even if you're slow and it's a one-lane road, you need to pull over and let the car pass. If it's
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes, Guam.
Hallelujah.
Guam, listen to this
Listen
man.
to this. Elective senator right now. When we come back from this commercial break, we'll bring you the issues that matter to Kandit and where Vince Borja stands on these issues.
As a defense attorney, I've represented many people who, if they weren't poor or they had received a higher education, may have taken a different path. As senator, I will propose a scholarship for those whose struggles are less academic and more financial. Let's keep our university full, not our prison. I'm Thomas Fisher. I not only approved this message, I wrote it.
Paid for by Tom for Guam, Drake Diaz, Treasurer.
Bottom line is we're gonna make you a better person. You're gonna be healthier and fitter than you were before.
Better hear what I've got to say, because you won't get it here.
Welcome back to our candidate profile program, To the Point, where we have in studios it's Republican senatorial candidate Vince Borja. I asked him where he got his shirt. He got it on base. There's a Guam, but I want a shirt like that because I like the red and I like the shininess. My shirt, not that you asked, but I'm going to tell you, is from Anywhere. And the reason I'm telling you, Anywhere Guam, the reason I'm telling you is because support local, buy local. The question about the economy is going to come up soon, but our economy is suffering, and I hope Mr. Borja will agree with that and will tell us how he plans to affect change for the betterment of our economy. But before that, before we get to our issues, Mr. Borja, who are you? What is your background and what qualifies you to be senator?
All right. If I start crying, just please, I'm kidding. But for those, I come from, my mom's an immigrant. My dad is Mr. Vincent Borja. His mom is Rosa Fernandez from Doña. My grandpa is Antonio Concepcion Borja from Santa Rita.
Immigrant
but
from where? Your mom's an
My
immigrant
mom's from the
where?
Philippines.
Okay.
Yes. Moved to Guam for a better life, I guess.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. I didn't really grow up with my mom. My grandmother raised me. And we lived in Backroad, Mingilao until Typhoon Paka took our home, and then we got the dollar homes, and we moved to the dollar homes in Asumbo, which is really where I developed, I think, as a teenager, or even as a person, because that's where I started doing a lot of bad things, I think, and kind of, I think I remember going from Antalan being okay, and then going to Derrida Middle School at the time, and jumping the fence, and like going with people down to Marble Cave, and their brother was supposed to pick us up, and we'd be there till like 8 p.m. at night, and trying to walk back down to Derrida. And but anyways, that was like
Well,
my
you sound
childhood.
like you're from our generation.
You sound like you're my cousin.
But if it's one thing I think that is important to share that has shaped my life, is that although my grandmother raised me, my dad was still around, but my dad was there but not really there, right? My dad did drugs. The environment I was in was surrounded in drugs. I felt, and you know, some of my family members might be upset when I say this, but I really felt like that was a bit like, I thought that was how we lived, right? I thought that this was normal and this is how we had paid for our bills. But then I also, as I got older, I realized we were on public assistance. You know, I always thought that the food stamp, the booklets back in the day was real money, right? I mean, that's how, I guess, I don't know, separated from society I was in regards to understanding what life was and how we were supposed to grow up. You know, most of my family members today still, you know, it's a generational thing on public assistance. I mean, I'm not going to lie, up until it clicked in my head in high school, I always thought that was how we lived. Like we have a family, we get on public, you know, we get food stamps for food. Back then they had welfare, it was a lot of money. They don't have that today. There was government housing, or the government gave us the dollar homes, right? My grandma paid $1 for 100 years, so we owned that for 100 years. But just that, I mean, and you know, meth was really what screwed up our lives. I mean, we went from living, I mean, even a wooden home, like who loses a wooden home, right? From that's how bad meth was in our family. In fact, my dad, I lost my father to drugs. It was a drug deal gone bad, and until this day, it's one of those like unsolved homicide cases. But it was at that point that I realized that I want something different. Right, I don't want to live this life. You know, there were two of us that were raised by my grandma. Like, we're both like the exact opposite in regards to how our life turned out to be, although we came from the same circumstances. You know, and even as I grew up, and I joined the military, got out of the military. As much as back then, remember 20 years ago, people would say don't go to the University of Guam because back then, right, accreditation was at risk. I knew that much. But I still wanted to come back after I got out of the military, and I wanted to come back and just be a part, you know, because one, I was always proud to tell people in the military or across the world, because I went to different places throughout the world, that I was from Guam. Because one thing I realized being out there was that we were a lot more, you know, humble. We were a lot more hospitable. We cared more about others than we cared about ourselves. And I wanted to come back and take the experience that I had and come back to Guam. And so I went to the University of Guam, although I thought it wasn't a good idea. I'm glad I did. It was probably one of the pivotal moments in my life that changed my career path. And since then, I got my master's degree. I'm working on my doctorates now. I'm married. I have a wife. We have 2 kids at home. And I run a digital marketing business part-time. I mean, you know, even now with the campaign, and I just want to put this disclaimer out there, because a lot of people are upset sometimes because I'm not very responsive. But I have a day job, I have a family, I have kids, and I also run a part-time business that requires me to be up at 1 a.m, right? And for me, that has a lot to do with just being afraid to fall back to, or not to fall back, but to even try to be in that position I was as a kid. Like, there were sometimes, or I wouldn't even say sometimes, like, there were most days, like, we only had 1 meal, right? And for me, like, it was normal. But even, like, when I got into the military, like, people tease me nowadays because I eat very fast. But I eat very fast because that's just how I ate when I was growing up, right? Like, when there was a meal, it's like I wanted to eat fast so that I could try and get seconds. And even at that, like, there was never enough, right? Because my grandma helped raise some of my other cousins. And so it's that drive and that experience that really has shaped who I am and where I am today. Not just in my success and what I do to take care of my family or to have the things that I didn't have growing up, but really just that mentality or that experience has, it's taken me far in my career. It has taken me far in everything that I've done as a person. And I think that that's really what has brought me to where I am today, is because I feel like most people on Guam, with jobs or without jobs, or, they struggle with, okay, really what what can I do to make my life better? And I think that a lot of them really ultimately turn to the government, and it's because of that culture and that mindset that we've kind of built, right? Where and some people say, well, they do that so that it's like when you give people stuff, right? It's narcissism, right? You give them things and you can control them, right? And we need to get away from that. We need to stop. It's not about giving handouts, I think, and it's very cliche because I've heard other candidates say, but really more of a hand up. And I'm approved to that if the government or if just people allow me to grow and challenge me to do things, then I'm going to find things to take care of me. Right? Like the times are tough here, and I understand that, which is why, like, as much as I hate to wake up at 1 a.m., nobody wants to wake up 1 a.m. after being at working all day, sometimes till 5 or 6 a.m. I also coach on the side. I coach cross country in the public and private school. So there's all these different things that I do. And even at the end of the day, it's not a lot of money, but I think for me, it's how do I find those? And really that's my mission in life. I mentor a lot of kids that kind of have similar backgrounds, or teenagers, even young adults today who have similar backgrounds. And really it's just when I share that story of really where I came from, because most people, you can look at me and people think like, oh, this guy's some rich guy, right? Or he's running for senator because he needs a job. Bruh, I'm actually going to make less money, right, if I gave up everything else that I'm doing right now to make this a focus, right? And I'm okay with that, because at the end of the day, it's about our kids at home and it's about everybody else's kids. Because right now, when you look at a lot of the things that we do today to address a lot of the issues, it's always to, where I came from, it's always putting out fires. Like, oh, there's a problem here, let's pour some water on it and put it out. Versus we need to have some foresight thinking in how we do things. And I think that I'm going off track, right? Because I went from telling my story to really where I'm at. But that's really my thinking is like, I get we can put fires out all day long, and I think anybody can do that. But it's really, how can we take a big, a top level approach and look at a lot of the different problems, and how can we create a culture? And I don't mean like a tomorrow culture, but an environment, right? Economically, I think as a Republican, I believe that you build a strong economy, people are going to be engaged, people are they're going to be a part of the community. When people contribute, they're more engaged, right? They're less likely to turn to drugs, because if you turn to drugs, you turn to crime, right? And that's really what it comes down to. Do you want me to keep going?
It's up to you. You're doing very well.
There was a lot I wanted to say.
There's just a lot of things, like when I was on the race show the other day, right? It's like I can sit here and say that we can create all these programs to put, Band-Aids on a lot of these social problems, right? Because I think you fix a lot of the social problems, you'll fix the unemployment rate. You fix a lot of these social problems, you'll fix, drugs. I believe, and this is just from experience, and I can tell you from experience, because I never will forget the day my father told me when I asked him, why do you do drugs? And he looked at me and he said, you know why I do drugs? Because it makes all my problems go away. Right? At that time, it was financial problems, right? And he said, every time I smoked it, I didn't have to worry about anything, because I felt like I could do anything in the world. And that's why he turned to drugs. And when I think about that and I think of where I'm at today, my wife, by the way, is a social worker, so I talk to her a lot. She's a counselor as well in the public school system. So I always talk to her a lot about just really affirming and confirming a lot of the things that I think on why a lot of our youth, as we go through those stages, because I was that kid. I skipped school a lot. I got arrested when I was in 8th grade. I was forced to, and I'll be very honest, somebody asked me if I ever tried meth. I was forced to do meth when I was a teenager, not because I wanted to, but I was told that I had to do it or I was going to get in trouble. And at that time, I love my grandmother. She really did I think if she didn't raise me, I don't think I would be where I'm at now, because it was those struggles and that experience that really pushed me to want to do better. But it's a lot of those things that I hope that most kids who come from my background, my economic social status when I was a kid, that they find that light or that path that clicked in my head one day and really go and do better. Or even those that didn't, because there are a lot that have come from good backgrounds, right? That need, I wish, not that I want them to go through bad stuff, but I feel like, you had, that was like you had that one up from me, right? So there's no excuse, because that's the thing. A lot of people make excuses about my life is bad because of the government, when really you're a product of your circumstances.
I'm glad you made it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's your grandmother's name?
I don't want to put that out.
Is she still around?
She's still around.
Okay.
And that's the other thing too. When people talk about my discipline, my grandma was a war survivor, but she wasn't old enough to really share a lot of that stories. But I will say that if it's one thing that she brought from that experience, it's the discipline, right? We've all, it's like the kids at home. We tell them all the time, man, 20 years ago, some of the things you say today.
I was arrested too when I was 8th grade, so yeah, you got drive, huh?
Well, I mean, you knocked off 3 of the 7 issues, 4 of the 7 issues. So, in just that introductory, so you know what, you just made this interview a whole lot easier. But our top issue, of course, is corruption. Your general response to how we can begin to address the issue of public corruption on the island.
Well, what I can tell you is, when I worked for corporate America almost 10 years ago, I was the ethics business and conduct ethics officer of this side, right? There was about 2,000 employees. But if it's one thing that I learned there, right, the big thing there, obviously we've dealt with a lot of government contracts, but ethics really starts at the top. At the end of the day, when we talk about corruption, when we look at corruption, or we just look at unethical behavior, period, right? Whether it be in the government, whether it be in the business, whether it be even in families, right? It comes from the head of the organization, right? A culture is built on leadership starts at the top. I mean, I don't care what anybody says, that sometimes there are some things that are out of control. But I think that when you focus, one, you put the right people in the right places, but you also have systems in place that are follow through. Because the thing about leadership, or even just anything that anybody does, whether it be government or private sector, is they put in all these systems. Like, you can create a commission, or you can create a department that is gonna, but I think at the end of the day is most people fail to do is the follow-up, right? You can put good processes in place, but I think one thing that we need to do is where's the follow-up in a lot of these investigations, right? They say, we'll just sit back and let it take its course, right? But if you have to put the right person in place, and you need to be able to have and it's always the follow-up that most people lack. But definitely, I think the systems are in place. I mean, they have the ethics commission. I think it should be elected. It shouldn't be appointed by the governor, because that just defeats all purpose. Because again, it starts at the top. And government, it's very tricky, right? Because hold on, I'm trying to be careful.
No, you don't have to be careful on this show. Just don't cuss.
No, don't be
But
careful.
it's easy for others to get influence in government, right? That's the sad thing, right? But yeah, I definitely think that we need to, one, you need to have somebody that you can trust, and one, it needs to be what am I trying to say? Not bipartisan, nonpartisan, right? And it shouldn't be appointed by the executive branch.
There are 4 issues that you already touched on in your very eloquent introduction. I'm going to name them, and you tell us whether there's more you want to expound on, okay? Violent crimes, sex crimes, jobs and economic future, and public education.
Okay. When we talk about crimes, sex crimes, drugs, I think the number one thing that we need to address is mental health. There's no easy solution to that, right? There's just so many. I'm also a veteran. I forgot to put that in there. I kind of shared that. But even at that, like, not that's one of the things that I'm more not. I think, like, I will drop everything. I'll drop whatever I'm doing for people that need somebody to talk to, or in that moment. But if it's one thing that I can share, is that obviously, I'm a war veteran. I've been to the combat zone about 3 times, and so even over the last 10 years, obviously I served over stateside. So most of the veterans I know that I serve with are not local, but I know many veterans, period, who have committed suicide over the last 2 years. More than 10 people. It's more fingers on my hands. But I also know a couple, not personally, but have known of people that locally, veterans that have committed suicide. But when we talk about mental health, when you talk about drugs, because drugs lead to crime, whether people say it, not necessarily, it does, right? People right now, especially people. I have cameras all over my home. Even in my office. I have an office. I have a camera in there too. And my wife thinks that she's gonna come there and rob me. But that's just how bad it is, right? And we need to look at how. And I know that the pandemic has a lot to do with mental health today, because even just with people I know closely, even my wife, it put her into depression a little bit, right? And it's just because of that social interaction that most people have kind of strayed away, right? And whether people think so or not, we need that in our lives. That's what makes us engaged and active human beings. But definitely need to address mental health, because you address mental health, you address some of the social issues, which addresses all these other things. And that is the root of a lot of the issues that we have that affect the community in general, and then we can move to healthcare now that we're talking about mental health, right? Because again, we look at, as a veteran, again, I know a lot of people that have to go to Hawaii to get specialty care. And I get that you can't just get a specialist to come here to address a very small population for whatever specialty they have, right? So again, it's, that's something that we need to, maybe it doesn't have to be the States, right? There is the Philippines, and that's all. I think when we talk about healthcare and how do we address that, I think it's going into the underserved communities, which is really where that outreach needs to be in regards to educating them what other options they have besides going to the States. The States would be great, but it's just not financially possible for a lot of people, right? So it's helping, I think, like we have an office. I'm not sure if we have one. I know that Guam has an office with GMH to go to California, because that's where my grandpa, my auntie, but I don't know if there's anything that helps people in underserved communities try to get help, in Asia. And I think that's something that we can look into in regards to access to healthcare and access to specialists. Because as much as we would like to try and figure out a way to bring specialists, it would be hard, just because, again, like if I was a specialist in, I don't know, brains, I know there are neurosurgeons on Guam, but they're hard to come by because my mom sees one every now and then, and that one comes from the States, and even at that, it's limited, right? And that's why they only come, for them, it's probably like a side hustle, right? To come to Guam to do so many patients, and I'm sure it's a lot more expensive because now you're paying for their airfare and all of that on top of the cost. And so definitely healthcare needs to be looked at, or I know it's being addressed, and it's something that we talk about all the time, because diabetes, and I can go on and on, but again, it's really how do we connect people, just like when I was in the military, it was okay, we don't have this here at our installation, right? And I think that it's really, how can we be resourceful, and how can we help those who have less, don't have access to a lot of information, to get that information so that they can get preventative health care, especially because most people today wait till it's bad, and then now we're trying to get them to California, or we're trying to get them to the Philippines. So that's my spill on healthcare.
Okay. In the midst of the housing crisis that we're having, and what I mean by that is that it's just unaffordable for most people on this island to afford to either buy or build a home. It's even getting unaffordable to rent a home. In the midst of that, a third of the island's landmass is occupied by the federal government. Another third is in private hands, and another third is with the government of Guam. And the largest portion of that third that's within the government of Guam is Chamorro Land Trust properties. Is there a plan that you have? Do you have any sort of position on land trust properties and how to get that out into private hands?
Well, with my experience with the land trust, I think they need to but just government in period, we need to streamline the way they deal with, just at the application process. My dad passed away in 2001. He got on the list. He got, his name came up. But even just to get information on, hey, what is the process on whether or not, because it's not for me, it's for like my other siblings who need land, right? And just like you have to submit these applications and you have to wait. I think we submitted applications 15 years ago and we haven't heard anything, right? But definitely look at how that process is, how it's given. I kind of I understand it a little bit. You have to wait for your name to come up. You have to apply, look at where you're at on the list, and then when your name comes up, you have to come in and figure out, get told where you're going. But I think, definitely look at all the other access line. I think the other thing too, and I'll be very straightforward. I'm pro-military. I was in the military. I know what value that brings to Guam and our region in regards to national security. But at the same time, I also understand that we need to, lands that they're not using, give it back. Give it to the people. There are a lot of people that need land or to build a home. And so, one, we need to try and get all that land back if they're not going to use it. If they're holding it for something at this point, they kind of understand what they're doing and what they're going to do here on Guam. We've been talking about the military buildup for a very long time. So holding on to land is really, I don't really know what that purpose is. But definitely give a lot of that land back, and definitely streamline the process and make it a lot more accessible. And I think that the commission is trying to do better, to do good by being a lot more transparent. But I don't think that when Pika was there, I heard a lot about the Land Trust Commission. Now, since Pika has left, you don't even really hear anything besides like when they were trying to fire the director, right? I think, or something. That's the last time I ever really heard about the Land Trust Commission. So definitely need to bring more light to that. It is really urgent right now. When you look at people trying to build homes or buy a home, I know at least 10 people off the top of my head that have been trying to buy a home or looked into buying a home over the last year and really just gave up on, one, the options, right, for what's within their budget, and then two, just the availability of homes for sale that are, again, reasonable and can support their family and their income.
What's your general position on reform of the Medical Malpractice Mandatory Arbitration Act?
My position at this point is really I've looked up, I've read some stuff on what the law is. I also have listened to some of the testimony. I know that there needs to, I talked to a senator who's in the legislature this term who a couple days ago about the bill that was introduced, and I agree that we need to find, I think at the end of our conversation, because I see both sides, right? I mean, I get there are bad doctors and they need to be held accountable. There are people that go through this experience, but at the end of the conversation, and I always see is where do we meet, right? What is the middle ground? And I'm open to looking at what that is. I don't have a stance on the bill that's in the legislature. That's a fight that I guess the big question is, where is that bill now? I mean, I heard about the public hearing was a while ago, actually, now that I think off the top of my head.
It was a while ago.
Yeah, so that's the question that we need to be asking, really, is where is that bill now and what are they going to do about it? But when I get in there and I have a full staff to help me collect all the data, and because I think for me, like they say, talk to this person or talk to this people or this group of people. At the end of the day, when I talk to this group of people, they're going to have their own stance on it, their views on it, based on, and I'm not saying because it aligns with their narrative, but it's just like if I'm pro-life, I'm not going to hide that. I'm going to continue to argue why I think pro-life is good. It's just like if you're pro-choice, you're going to continue to argue with me, and both sides are valid, because at the end of the day, it comes down to what do you value as a person, and so in regards to that, I think right now I've heard both sides and they're both biased opinions. So now I need to take those opinions, do my own research, and then be able to come up with something. But as always, I think it should be fair to everybody, and there should be some kind of middle ground, not just okay, this supports the claimant or this supports doctors, and so that's my stance. Okay,
and the last issue is shipping. The cost of shipping.
It's crazy. not shipping, but just the cost of goods, period. I shop at Payless, but I also shop in Bays, and even there you see how drastic the goods have gone up, period. But we definitely need to look at how we can help bring that shipping. Yes, we need to address that. The Jones Act needs to be looked at. I know I've seen some ads and a lot of the media that you guys have put out. But, even for now, and I think I wrote a letter to the editor a couple months ago about, in California, because cost of living is very high there too. I lived there for a little bit. Like there, you don't pay taxes on food, right? So that can help. That's one way to bring down the cost of goods especially for food. I mean, you need food to survive, but definitely look at the Jones Act for sure needs to be looked at. But there are definitely other ways to bring down the cost of living for our people, and it starts with really, as a conservative, we need to really, look at right size the government to where we're not, it's not an ecosystem of how it just seems more like a ecosystem in providing, securing jobs for some people, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, is how can we keep taxes down, because that's really where a lot of the burden comes from. And that's really where I think we should start.
Okay. I don't have any more issues. Do you have any more issues?
For me.
No? Okay, so this is the part. Great job, Vince. This is the part. Is this his camera right here? When you look into this camera and talk to our audience, appeal to them, and don't forget to ask them to vote for you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, Kandit. Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Johnny. My name is Vince Borja. I'm number 9 on the Republican side, the red side, the good side.
You weren't crossed out?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just checking.
Yeah. But I'm here today not because I'm here today running because of people like my family, our kids at home, and I'm here to bring good ideas and new ideas that really I think are going to do good for Guam, and not I think, but I know are going to do good for Guam in the long term. I don't come because I know everything. I come because I come with a heart that's in the right place, and I want things to be better for our people and our children. And I ask you to vote for me. I'm number 9 on the Republican side. Thank you.
Nice.
Great.
This was a great
To the
interview.
point.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Did you enjoy being here?
Yes, thank you.
I know it's
fun.
really early in the morning.
Was it everything you expected?
I don't know why you chose the 7 a.m. slot, but hey, you got a lot of views, so
Yes.
Appreciate it.
don't forget
Thank
to go
you.
to the feed and because people are they're saying nice things about you, and
Yeah.
you might want to thank them and stuff like that. Ask for their vote.
All
Thank
right,
you so much
thanks.
for joining us, Mr. Borja. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres.
And I'm Johnny Rosario.
Have a good morning.
I feel that this environment is for anybody that wants to try something new, whether it is CrossFit or powerlifting. We offer a safe space for someone who's never been athletically inclined to try something that they've never done before.
The Jones Act is a 1920 law justified on national security grounds as a means to bolster the U.S. maritime industry. It restricts domestic shipping to vessels that are U.S. built, U.S. owned, U.S. flagged, and U.S. crewed. However, this law boosts cost by banning foreigners from competing and forcing Americans to purchase ships that are up to 8 times more expensive than those built in other countries. The result is higher transportation costs. Shipping oil from Texas to the Northeast, for example, costs 3 times more than importing oil from Africa. Ultimately, consumers foot the bill. In addition, higher shipping costs push freight from ships onto other sources of transportation, such as trucks, which means more traffic and pollution. Meanwhile, this blatant protectionism has failed to benefit builders of ships in the U.S., whose production is less than 1% of those in China and South Korea. Domestic builders have seen over 300 shipyards close since the early 1980s. Jones Act defenders claim the law ensures adequate U.S. ships during times of war, but during U.S. deployments during Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, foreign flagged commercial ships carried twice as much equipment as their U.S. counterparts. In fact, the U.S. was so desperate for shipping that it twice requested the use of a cargo ship from Moscow. Both requests were denied. So the Jones Act has failed to achieve its shipbuilding and national security goals while driving up costs for consumers. It's time for this outdated, costly, and ineffective law to be repealed. It's time to end the Jones Act.